So in this presentation, I will show you Singapore Company Incorporation statistics for 2019. Now this topic is not really the core subject of our channel. However, I thought since it is related to it, seeing this incorporation statistics for year 2019 will be interesting to you. This has been based on the entire 2019 year data, and it has been compiled from various ACRA and government systems. So we had sourced this data from various places. So let's start. First, let's look at the total number of business formations and cessations in Singapore in 2019. So here is the table summarizing this. So total 43,920 companies, 15,828 sole proprietorship, 1700 plus limited liability partnership, around 104 limited partnership, and 11 public accountant firms were registered in 2019. At the same time, 23,000 companies, around 22,000 sole proprietorship, around 1400 limited liability partnership, around 87 limited partnership, and 38 public accounting firms closed during the year. So one interesting fact I note is that more sole proprietorship and partnership closed than those were formed, and the number of limited liability partnership closed was also near to or in the same range around how many were formed. But the number of companies formed was quite high compared to those closed. This I think indicates the tendency or a trend towards moving to corporate as a structure by closing other business entities. Now one key point to note here, this cessations what we see, these companies on an average might have been created. Now one key important point to note here is that cessation what we see here are the business entities those have been registered or formed few years back. So it is something like 4 or 5 years back a company was incorporated and that is getting close here now. So the next slide is on the sectoral breakup of formation of companies. So out of 43,920 companies incorporated, the breakup is like this. So I will not read everything. Instead what I am going to do is I am going to show you a pie chart. So the pie chart looks like this. And as you can see, if you start from the middle part, this one, 17%, you will notice that professional, scientific and technical activities, wholesale trade, information and communications, financial, insurance and retail trade. Top 5 sectors account for more than 50% of new formations of companies. And if you look at the bottom 3 or 5, accommodation, others, real estate activities, manufacturing and construction. So this is the part what we see here. So these are very less compared to the top one. This indicates that Singapore economy is primarily service-based economy and the extent of manufacturing over the last few years has reduced. Moving on to next slide, we will have a look at companies formed in 2019 by share capital. So the breakup looks like this. Companies with more than 500,000 Singapore dollars capital were only 834. Between 100,000 to 500,000 there were 1,405 companies. Companies formed between 10,000 to $100,000 capital were 7,334. And less than 10,000 Singapore dollar capital were 34,347. So as you can see, the number of companies getting formed with less than $10,000 capital is almost near to 80%, and that is a significant portion. It indicates that majority of these companies are more of a SME type and are being run on a small scale basis. So on this slide, let's have a look at the ownership structure of the Singapore entities. How many of them were owned by Singapore local versus how many were owned by foreigners. So I am presenting here the data table as well as the chart, and as you can see, almost 47% of the companies were 100% owned by local residents. whereas 12% were owned by a mix of local and foreigners. So at least one of the partner or one of the shareholders in these companies was foreigner, and 41% of the companies were 100% owned by foreigners. So as you can see, there is a very high percentage of foreigners involvement in these companies, which actually indicates that Singapore is being preferred as a location for business formation by foreigners also. The majority of these foreigners came from the countries like China, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, and United Kingdom. And obviously, there will be people coming from all other countries over the world in smaller percentages. Moving on to next, we will have a look at the ownership of these companies by entity types. So here is the table. So individuals own almost 36,234 companies, which represents 82.5% of total companies formed in 2019. These companies are called as Exum PT Limited, whereas the corporate ownership was there in roughly 16.5% of the companies, representing around 7,246 companies. And other entities were 440, which represented 1%. And these other entities include foreign branches, public limited companies by guarantee, and public limited companies by shares. So, in summary, the rate of company incorporation in Singapore is quite high, but it also indicates the trust of foreigners have in Singapore economic system.
Thank you for watching this video. This video was brought to you by Epica Consulting Singapore. Subscribe to our channel today to get notified when new videos are posted.